Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Thank you for joining today's webinar hosted by the Sikh Research Institute. My name is Jasdeep Singh and I'll be the host and moderator for today's session. The presentation will begin shortly. Before we get started, I want to review a few housekeeping items and let you know how you can participate in today's event. I will then provide information about the Sikh Research Institute and today's presenter, Harinder Singh, before turning it over for the main presentation. You're looking at an example of the GoToWebinar attendee interface. It is made up of two parts: the viewer window on the left, which allows you to see everything the presenters will share on the screen, and the control panel at the right. Use the orange arrow to open and close the panel. The audio pane provides audio information. By default, you've joined the webinar via mic and speakers. If you prefer, you can join the audio via telephone by selecting Use Telephone, and the dial-in information will be displayed, including an audio pin. You can send your questions either by typing in the questions panel, or you may ask it over the mic. In case you don't have a mic, please state your name, city, and question in the questions panel. You can send the questions to us while the session is in progress. However, they will be answered towards the end of the presentation. As a reminder, today's webinar is being recorded, and everyone will receive an email within 7 days with a link to view a recording of today's event. If for any reason you experience any technical difficulties during the session and you can't see the main presentation, then please do not hesitate to contact me via the chat panel. If you lose your internet connection or have to restart your computer during the session, then you can rejoin the session by clicking on the URL that is included in your original confirmation email. Finally, at the end of the presentation, I'll launch a testimonial and feedback window. We'd appreciate if you could take a few moments to provide your feedback and comments on how the session went and how we can improve future sessions. I'll now provide some background to the Institute and also Harinder Singh. The mission of the Sikh Research Institute is to provide educational resources to Sikhs to lead a Guru-inspired life. SikhRI is an inclusive resource for you, your family, your community, and 30 million Sikhs worldwide. We are focused on helping you fall in love with Psyche. SikhRI's annual leadership development program for young adults will be held from July 24th to August 6th at the Khalsa Center in British Columbia. To learn more about it and to reserve your spot, visit sidak.org. That is sidak.org. SikhRI has published a number of books, which some of them include Thank You Waheguru, Guru Granth Sahib, Its Language and Grammar, Sikh Faith and Followers, and My Gurmukhi Khajana. All SikhRI products are available for sale on sikhri.org. I'd like to introduce our presenter, Harinder Singh. Harinder is a widely respected activist educator who is deeply in love with one force, the oneness that radiates in all. Love and justice principles propel him to leverage public awareness for social change. Singh currently serves as an organizer of the Free Akal Takht, a movement to engage Sikhs around the world in developing and enacting the self-governance model for collective decision-making. Prior to joining Free Akal Takht, Singh co-founded Sikh Research Institute and Punjab National Library, and has served on the boards of the National Conference on Community and Justice, the Fellowship of Activists to Embrace Humanity, the Nanak Shahi Trust, among others. He's an author and sought-after public speaker, educating audiences around the world on Sikhi and Punjab. He regularly appears in radio and television programs. He currently resides in New Jersey and holds a Bachelor of Sciences in Aerospace Engineering, Masters of Sciences in Engineering Management, and MPhil in Guru Granth Sahib. So without further ado, I'd like to pass it over to Harinder Singh to begin today's presentation. Give me one moment while I transfer control to Harinder. Harinder Briji, you are the presenter. We cannot hear.
Okay, can you guys hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Thank you, Jasdeep. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh, and greetings of the day, depending on where you are, morning, afternoon, or evening. Well, today, as the webinar is titled 1984 After the Darkness, that's what I'm going to talk about. But before I actually talk about this opening slide is a quote from Guru Granth Sahib, where essentially what is being said by the Guru is that there are always certain agencies in the world whose behavior, in this case, they're saying dog-like behavior, essentially saying that there are individuals, groups, or people who are always violating what Guru Sahib calls jewel-like human beings, essentially saying the most invaluable thing in this world. Today we say there are 7.2 billion people, and we see this happening even today. But there are people who are violating individuals, human beings, which are the most, and that behavior is called dog-like in this court, and nobody's paying attention to that particular behavior, which means why are these atrocities, either in today's parlance we'll call them, they're either not talked about, or they're not documented, or there's no redress or reparation, truth or reconciliation, whatever else you might want to call it. So this idea is, I mean, you see the red in this painting. This is, I'm going to talk a little bit about the reds as well. This red, yes, is the color of the blood, but is also the color of love. And how this idea of shahadats, the spilling of the blood, seems to be that the world finds out about Sikhs when you do talk about quote-unquote bloody images. But at the same time, this is not a new phenomenon. This is how it has been even in the 16th to 18th centuries. But the main point is that there is this phenomena in the world that whenever there is ugliness, goriness, bloodiness, people don't want to talk about it, or they don't know how to talk about it. And there seems to be conspiracy of silences, including among the nations, games which nations are playing. I have done webinars on 84 before, June, November, and other times. Today, this is going to be a little bit different. What is different is that I'm not going to really get into certain documentations or what certain generals have said, or the propaganda wars which exist. The purpose today, what I want to get into is, which is really on the next slide, is talk, I'm going to weave some of the personal memories of 84 here. What did I see in June? What did I see in November? What were the surroundings around me? And how are these related to when the genocides have taken place in a collective psyche, which means that my development on dealing with this, or witnessing, or surviving, or talking about, in conjunction with how I had learned about what the Sikh psyche thinks of all these things. That didn't happen in 84 itself for me. That's been evolving process. And so I'm going to weave in some of the collective psyche with it. And then also how Gurbani talks about confronting injustice. So where needed, I will talk about some documentations, maybe some of the things which haven't been publicly shared as much before, including some documents. I know they're not secret, but they're not as accessible, or perhaps it's the first time some of the documents will be seen. But essentially, this is more about the narratives today. Personal narrative, collective Sikh narrative, as well as the Gurbani's take on Why is it that what we do, why do Sikhs do what they do? What is this idea of light and love, which has to do with wisdom and how we operate? So this is going to be more of a personal collective memory in conjunction with how do we deal with some of this. So after the darkness, the reason I call after the darkness, and it's debatable whether some people say, well, this wasn't the darkness. So I'm using the word darkness in a popular sense here, that there were genocidal campaigns, and yes, there are all sorts of words used between June and November and afterwards, but largely it has been accepted view now that these campaigns had to do with eliminations of not one individual, but the collective elimination of people, communities, Sikhs. Okay, let me start in the May of 1984 from a personal angle. So I was at Darbar Sahib complex. My family, mom, dad, and three of us, two of my siblings, three children they have. So five of us, we were at Darbar Sahib complex in May 25. Now, when I say Darbar Sahib complex, I explicitly am going to call it Harinder Sahib and Akal Takht Sahib complex, which I'm going to call it HAS. H for Harinder Sahib, A for Akal Takht, and Sahib complex. What I want to just share is, even when I'm going there, I realize there are at least two major gurdwaras, but there are actually 4 or 5 major gurdwaras. Actually, historically, this complex is many, many more. But even I wasn't aware of this, as many of you may be, or maybe are not aware of these things. But when I do go there on May 25th with my family, two things I want to share. We get off the railway station, and we're going to Darbar Sahib complex. And twice our three-wheeler, the auto rickshaws they call them, it was stopped. Police checked. I guess they didn't find anything objectionable on us, and they allowed us to go to the Darbar Sahib complex. Now, why were we there? We lived in Jhansi, UP, which is a very different state, south of Delhi, and this is north of Delhi, roughly the same distances, a little bit more. We were there because on the anniversaries of Gurpurab, Guru Arjan Sahib, there were travelers, yatris as they call them, Jatha going to visit Pakistan. And again, Pakistan invokes all sorts of feelings depending on, what the current phenomena of the countries are and the current leaderships are. But Jatha going to Pakistan has a very different meaning. Jatha is a very traditional word. Jatha means a group of Sikhs going to Pakistan to visit the historical places of the Gurus. In this case, invoking the memories of Guru Arjan Sahib, but also visiting places associated with other Gurus from Guru Nanak through Guru Ram Das Sahib and other places as well. So we were there because of that. We thought we will go there to Harmandir Sahib and Akal Takht Sahib complex. As I mentioned, we were checked twice. We were stopped. Yes, there is a presence of police, visible one. But interestingly, I had heard by then, because the only news channel used to be the Doordarshans, we had heard of a guy named Pindranwale. We have heard there were tensions in Punjab. We had heard, and I am technically 11 years old at the time. So I'm like, let's go check out this guy. My dad, other people, let's go check out who this man who's popularly known as Sant Pindranwale is. There was an excitement of one level because, in the Sikh world, even back then, he was considered that this man has a backbone. In the government world, it was considered this is a man nobody used to call him terrorist back then. This is a term which gets used afterwards. They used to call him he's a separatist leader, or he is the sort of in his own terms actually, he called himself, he's the paredar, the watchman, not the leader. So he was the alternative Akali leadership, if anything, if you want to look at it from that angle. Well, unfortunately, when we get to where he used to meet Sangats, that evening he doesn't come. There's a disappointment. Next day we are leaving for Lahore. And when we are leaving next day, border security force with loaded guns on their shoulders around lines of complex, Harmandir Sahib and Akal Takht complex are very visible. So within 2 days, essentially what you see is that on 27th, when the train is to leave from Amritsar railway station, that when we came in, we were checked, our entries were allowed, but we were not stopped. There was nothing objectionable found, I suppose. And then access was open, but when we were leaving, Access is still open to leave, but the heavy presence of border security forces was very visible. Now, we get on a train goes to Nankana Sahib. This used to be generally 10-day trips. We have a visa to go to Pakistan to visit Nankana Sahib, Panja Sahib, Panja Sahib. Nankana Sahib is a birthplace of Guru Nanak. Panja Sahib is associated with Guru Nanak Sahib, and the station is Hassan Abdal. Then Dera Sahib is associated with Guru Arjan Sahib, which was to commemorate the martyrdom of Guru Arjan, which is in Lahore, just so we have our bearings right. Now, first stop we have is Nankana Sahib. I'm not going to get into details of what we were seeing at the feelings it invoked to be in the places of the gurus. I'll keep it to June and November sort of elements, 84 elements here. First, we had heard, it's important, first we heard about mass military movement was on May 31st. Which is very interesting. And we just heard that there's something going on in Punjab. And obviously, we had seen that there was unrest of a sort, there was tension of a sort. But in Pakistan, on May 31st, we started hearing about it. And on June 4th, we actually saw the images on Pakistan TV, which is PTV, of various sort of shots, you can say, real newsreel. By the way, these newsreels did show and talked about that there were attacks happening in Amritsar, in the Harinder Sahib and the Akal Takht Sahib complex. The images were first time came on Pakistan TV. Now this is very interesting. Obviously, the excitement of the Sangats or the Jatha, and I used the word Jatha earlier because the word Jatha gets invoked very differently these days. And I'm going to talk about that too. Depending on the news item, Jatha could become a very radical force, or Jatha could be a group of people in a religious sense, or Jatha could be, as the CPI and CPM uses some of it, that they're the activists, because they also use that term sometimes. Now, between June 4th and June 6th, this is very interesting. We were supposed to leave Lahore on June 6th. We go to the train station. Now, between 4th and 6th, it's very much established that there is, depending on how you look at it, what we were being told sitting in Pakistan was, or we were hearing on the TV there, was that there are attacks. There were conversations which were taking place because SGPC's personnel were part of the Jatha, and I'm going to talk about a couple of those individuals. They were talking about what's going on, the conversations between Pakistani government officials, we'll call them, their announcements in Gurdwaras and what they were saying on Pakistan TV and their journalists. It was pretty clear that there is a gruesome battle going on. Some, obviously Operation Blue Star as a term gets used, but this is what we're hearing, that there's a fight going on. There is a lot of damage has been done to Akal Takht, and Pindrawale and his men have been martyred or killed, depending on which version you look at it. So we heard all this. And June 6th, we want to come back. So I want to come to my part of the story, which essentially is we want to come back on June 6th. We go to Lahore railway station, and from Lahore, the train doesn't take off. And this is where I call India didn't want me, and Pakistan said, you don't have a visa to stay. What really was going on was on June 6th, we were supposed to leave, but the Punjab, what we are being told by the Pakistani government on the railway station through the loudspeakers is, you can't go back because India doesn't want you to come back. They're not allowing you to come back. Obviously, we know the reasons now. So this is like Toba Take Singh kind of a thing going on, although this is not between the Atari and Wagah yet. But this is like, are we in a no man's land again? We can't stay in Pakistan. We can't go back to India, which is the country of our citizenship and birth and where we belong, residency. At the end, essentially, what happens is Pakistan grants 2 more days of visa. None of us have any money, any food, any places to stay. They provide all those things. So we become their guests for 2 more days and incredible hospitality. But the mood has completely changed. The excitements had already changed into somberness. And then now knowing that you might not even be allowed to go back, you can imagine all the sort of uncertainties. Anyway, June 6th, we come back to Lahore railway station. The train from Lahore goes all the way to Wagah, which is the Pakistan side of the last station on the border. We get off there, we walk from Wagah to Atari station, about half a mile or so, half a kilometer or so. There are multiple checks by police, by border, who knows how many, which paramilitary forces, as if we are not yatris anymore. Now we are a Jatha of 1,245 or whatever the number was, 1,200 plus men, women, and children. All of a sudden, we are not the travelers, the yatris, the pilgrims, and now we have become something else. Whatever that something else is, they're not saying it, but there is not once or twice or thrice, multiple checkings. Like a whole day goes into checkings. In the evening, the train takes off, everything is locked. There are no announcements, and we are thinking, okay, in about half an hour, we'll be getting off at Amritsar because that's where we're supposed to get off. As the Amritsar station approaches, we pick up our luggage, we are going towards the door, and the train doesn't stop. And all you see from there is there's no lights. It's all dark. Station is completely dark. Even bit from Atari to Amritsar, it looked funny. Funny in the sense that the train left very late. Train was completely locked. There were no announcements of any kind. If you are a traveler, you know there are all sorts of announcements. But anyway, train doesn't stop. We see smoke from far behind. We see Indian Army men pointing guns at us as if we are going to do something within the train and they're going to shoot us. Well, we don't know what's happening. So train continues. There are no announcements. Few small stations pass by. Few big stations pass by. And throughout the track, on the track, every few miles, 2 or 3 miles, there will be 2 or 3 army men pointing guns at us towards the train as if we were going to do certain things. There's no traffic visible on the roads because, in some areas, roads are running parallel to the railway tracks in Punjab. There's no traffic at all. All the train stations are blacked out, which means no lights are on. And train just continues, Jalandhar passes by, Ludhiana passes by. Eventually, after several hours, with no food and nothing essentially, no information, no food, not knowing what the next step will be, we eventually stop in Ambala for 15 minutes. When there is announcement, there are lights on the station. Ambala is, just basically for everyone's benefit, this is the first major station outside of Punjab in Haryana. Ambala cantonment. So this is where the train stops. So we go throughout Punjab, and what we see is this whole idea now we know of as being Punjab has been cordoned or blacked out, sealed, no information being allowed back and forth, things of that nature were seen. And another interesting thing to be seen was that on the train, there are emergency brakes. Basically, if you pull them, train gets stops. Those were all disabled throughout the train. So there was no option to get off the train, not knowing where the train is going, not knowing where the train will stop, not knowing, essentially no certainty. I mean, no information at all. And you can imagine personally at my level, at a family level, at a collective group, Jatha level, the kind of sentiments and feelings. In some cases, they were jakares at some point. In other cases, they were just sitting quietly, doing more part and chapa hisabs than rehrases and trying to figure out what to do. Now, this is what I witnessed, what was going on. Now, since then we know, but before I get into it, I want to share one statement. This statement is on May 27th, before leaving for Pakistan. This statement is by then Secretary of SGPC, Sardar Pan Singh. The statement of Pan Singh is to Gurmeet Singh. Some of you might be aware of Gurmeet Singh. He was known as Gurmeet Singh Advocate. He was a lawyer. He wrote several books. One of the ones which is relevant here is he wrote essentially History of Sikh Struggle in 4 volumes, which has incredible documentations of all the political activities of Sikhs from 47 onwards till essentially till late 90s. That then SGPC Secretary Pan Singh says this to Gurmeet Singh, and look at this quote. And I quote it because Gurmeet Singh penned it down, and Pan Singh verified it before he was assassinated. Sant Bhindranwale's men claim that they can face the Indian Army's onslaught at least for a week of their own without any outside help. Their determination is their greatest strength. My purpose of sharing this is that SGPC's secretary is very aware of what Bhindranwale and his men are going to be doing, why they will be defending, why they will be staying. So there is no secret about this. Okay, which means they also know army is going to be attacking. This is May 27th of 1984 conversation which SGPC secretary tells Gurmeet Singh Advocate, and Gurmeet Singh Advocate is on this train with this Jatha who actually skips out Nankana Sahib onwards because the some of the men, as Gurmeet Singh has shared, Pakistani men were trying to talk to him and there were conversations happening, but that's for another day. Okay, now what do we know since then? Let me share a couple of things here. These are pictures some of you maybe have seen, but I don't think they're as visible, as available, or as accessible. They're from Indian magazines. The one on the left I want to basically mention Bhindranwale and Longowal, Sant Harcharan Singh Longowal and Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale. There were multiple veins of Akalis back then. So this is my learnings. And this is now I'm trying to figure out how to explain these phenomena from narrative angles. So you know how today's Akalis, when you look in 2016, there is only one Akali school of thought. In 80s, there were multiple Akali schools of thought, including Mr. Badal was there, who is currently the CM. Mr. Toda was there. Mr. Talwandi was there. And then two which are shown here are Sant Longowal and Sant Bhindranwale were there. Now, interesting thing is that picture is very telling. And if you look at it, it says rare moment. Harchand Singh Longowal, Akali Dal President, Center walks with Bhindranwale. This was essentially like a saluting of Kirpans. This is not flashing of the swords in some fight. This is how Sikhs, even when Sardar Kapoor Singh was declared National Professor of Sikhism for the first time when he goes in public, this is how they saluted him. Sort of like if you go to some military ceremonies. So this is something, when we look at swords, it is not that there's a fight going on. It basically used to be a way to salute as well. The second picture on the right side, what I want you to pay attention to is it says they came from various sections and included the aged. Now what this is speaking to is that Bhindranwale spoke to, through his leadership, spoke to multiple people. It wasn't just one or the other kind of men who came there. He spoke to, as this magazine says, they came from various sections and included the aged. Again, today my job is not to defend one person or talk about one person or talk about, General Brar's version versus Arif Khan's version. It's more to talk about the narratives. Now, I do want to share these pictures because there's a divide which has been existing in Delhi versus Punjab Sikhs, which essentially is it's quite unfounded. If you look at the picture on the left, again, publicly, which appeared, these pictures are from magazines in India, which were published in India, national magazines, English magazines. It says protesters on Delhi streets following Operation Blue Star in Amritsar. The organized call for revenge. These are their words, the magazine's words. What I'm essentially saying is, if you look on the right side, it says we wanted justice, government gave us bullets. Then it says an angry, back to the wall, fighting mood where two women, with a very visible Amritari women, initiated women with the two visible Gatras, shouting back at army. Now my point of sharing this is that the sentiments, yes, sometimes we quote what Khushwant Singh was thinking, and yes, he went to President Zail Singh's in the presence of Trilochan Singh, who eventually became the minority commissioner in India, and they talk about why he gave his medals back and foreign services people who left their positions. So we talk about the prominent people, and they're well documented. Here are the average people. including in Delhi. So to say that people in Delhi were not connected or were not aware of what was happening in Punjab is a misnomer. Delhi Sikhs very much were switched on about what was happening in Punjab, including in quote-unquote Operation Blue Star, which is more of Jang Hind Punjab or Battle of Amritsar, is another way to look at it. Now, these two other documents I want to talk about. First one, I don't know if anyone has ever seen the postmortem reports of Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale and postmortem report of Major General Shubeg Singh. He was a Major General of Indian Army who was dishonorably discharged essentially from the army, who then joined Bhindranwale and his men to defend Darbar Sahib complex and Akal Takht Sahib complex. Okay, these are postmortem reports. All I want to mention is there's a lot of stuff which Tavleen Singh of India Today has written about Bhindranwale. There is his article by his brother who served in Indian Army as well. There are books written about against him, for him. There are speeches translated by him. All I want to mention here is the postmortem report, if you do analysis, also shows lies about when he died, how he died, the timing of his death. And this analysis was done by Surya magazine. I don't know if you're able to read it, but this is not the time to go over the full analysis. All I want to mention is including the whole mechanisms which are employed eventually after the death of Chathedar Bhindranwale is how I call him, whether he even died or not, whether when he died, how he died, whether he had eaten before he died. I mean, there are all sorts of details are available of this. And all I'm trying to say is that if somebody really is interested in understanding what took place for those 46 to 50 hours in Harinder Sahib and Akal Takht Sahib complex, we need to understand the people who were fighting, the reports which were available, these postmortems which were conducted, and how the analysis of postmortem also shows that what is written by the government version in the white papers, what is created in the propaganda, including by certain Sikh organizations, there's a lot of misleading information out there. Okay. Now, government has said all sorts of different things about who died there, but at least 170 pictures were printed within a month in an Indian magazine of people who had nothing to do with fighting the state and how they were killed. Literally, their names, their pictures were publicly available and printed. So this whole sort of, sometimes people like me growing up thought nobody was documenting this. What happened? This is such a big thing which happened. And yes, we quote a New York Times report and the Christian Science Monitor report and the UK's Telegraph reports. Those are important. But there are real human elements to this as well. And this whole thing about teaching Sikhs lessons to creating this vengeance against the Sikh. The word revenge gets used even in this documentation by one of the Indian monthly magazines. But there were real people involved. Another thing I want to mention here is the very first list. This is about documenting and not knowing, and then again connecting it to the SGPC secretary at the time, Pan Singh. He actually compiled a list of 706 Sikhs, he called it, whose postmortem was conducted, who were not part of Bhindranwale and his men. First list which was developed. I don't know why SGPC does not make this list public. The reason I have this list is because Dr. Joyce Pettigrew entrusted me with this list, and I have her letter written by Pan Singh who says, I don't know who to trust this list with, so I'm sending it to you. So this went from Sardar Pan Singh. Again, he is the guy who gave that statement to Gurmeet Singh, which I shared earlier. He's a secretary of SGPC in 84 and 85. He is the one who compiles this list, and look at the details on this list. So this whole thing about Sikhs were not documenting, people in SGPC were not documenting, there were different efforts going on. But what has happened to these lists? Why are they not publicly available? Why are they not talked about? Why are these not being fought out in the courts? In June cases, we know November cases are fought out in court. Look at the details. It says Shaheed da naam, Pita da naam te pura pata, name of the martyr, father's name and the complete address. Umar, the age. Varas da naam, who is the survivor? Varas is basically survive, does the wife get it or the children who survived them? Bachyan da verwa, their offsprings. And tasdeeq karan wale da naam, who actually gave the information, verifications. This is quite detailed. 706 on the list. I have the complete list. They have been digitized, where the postmortem was also conducted. So this list is only of the ones where the postmortems of the yatris or the travelers or the pilgrims who were in Darbar Sahib complex, which Sardar Pan Singh compiled himself. Okay. Now I do want to share one more document which has been discovered since then. Now I had heard about this document. I have quoted this document, but today I want to share this document. This is the Baatcheet fortnightly, as it's called, every 15 days. This is printed, used to be printed and it says issued by Army Headquartered Government of India. I want you to look at the date. It says July 84, serial number 153, situation in Punjab, annexure number 2. And I want to just read this to you just to make it very clear that how organized it was. It says, some of our innocent countrymen were administered oath in the name of religion to support extremists and actively participate in the act of terrorism. These people wear a miniature kirpan around their neck and are called amritaris. This is a blanket war declared on all initiated Sikhs. And the identifiers are that they wear kirpans. An appeal. Although majority of the terrorists have been dealt with, so all Amritaris are terrorists. That's what this is saying. Although majority of the terrorists have been dealt with and bulk of the arms and ammunitions recovered, yet a large number of them are still at large. They have to be subdued to achieve the final aim of restoring peace in the country. Any knowledge of the Amritaris? Look, again it says Amritaris, who are dangerous people and pledged to commit murder, arson, and acts of terrorism should immediately be brought to the notice of the authorities. These people may appear harmless from outside, but they are basically committed to terrorism in the interest of all of us. Their identity and whereabouts, well, it's a little bit cut out there. So as you can see, I mean, this becomes Orwellian very quickly. I don't know how many of you have read 1984 by George Orwell, where the country is Oceania, and they have something called Ministry of Love, which essentially was about torture and killings, and they have something called Ministry of Truth, which was all about propaganda. This plays into that. And it's not an irony, it's more of a deja vu that this is actually happening in 84. So this is not fiction, guys. This is the kind of stuff which I had heard about, and then documentations of these are now available. Let me come back to my story on 84. I'm going to go in and out of it. Let's come to October 1984, October 31st. Mrs. Gandhi, who has been assassinated, who is the sitting Prime Minister, then Prime Minister of India, who had ordered attack on Darbar Sahib complex. You guys all know that. But this is roughly around 11:30 a.m., 12 p.m., almost noon. I'm in the market. I'm 12 years old. And at the shop I'm at, the shopkeeper looks at me and he says, I was buying something, and he goes, Sardar ji, agar main hu aap hoon, to ghar chala jaun isi waqt. In Hindi he's telling me, because in Jhansi we spoke Hindi. It says, if I were you, I would go home now, which means he's hearing things in the market, he's hearing things on the radio, which is, he's looking out for me. He's essentially saying, because I used to go to this shop regularly, he's like, it's time to go home, buddy. Something's going to happen. And what happens that very night, most reports say, they talk about Delhi, Some of them talk about Kanpur. They completely ignore what happened or didn't happen in Bombay and why, or what happened or didn't happen in West Bengal. And I say that on purpose. And I'm going to come back to it, but actually let me mention it right now. In West Bengal, when Rajiv Gandhi is leaving, he's in Bengal, and Jyoti Basu is standing there. Jyoti Basu is quoted as saying, when Rajiv Gandhi is getting on the plane, he says, "Let me go take care of the bastard Sikhs now." That's October 31st, guys. What happens in Delhi? And yes, that is the one where we have much more documentation and some highlighting because of people like Mr. Harinder Singh Fulka, but much more happened all around India. Okay, that night our house was put on fire. It was torched around 11 p.m. I remember my dad and my chachas, two chachas, younger brothers of my dad, running after them. My dad had a kirpan in his hand. He actually caught one of the guys. Interesting part is he gives him to police. The police guys next to release him. One of the guys he caught, and this is the irony, or I don't know what to call it. Or you tell me. Essentially, I'll just share what it is. One of the guys he's caught is the guy who he's been funding. So, sometimes you say it was the mobs. Yes, it is the mobs. And yes, sometimes they were bust from different areas. In our case, one of the guys who actually came to burn our house was a guy who lived not very far from our house and who my dad actually had helped go to school with as well. He caught him, gave it to the police, Thanedar, as they call him. The guy was released next day. While all this is going on, we are children, young children. We lived in a combined family. Nobody's helping us, but one Hindu neighbor helps us. He lived not a next door neighbor, but a next to next door neighbor. Bhagwan Das. We go spend time with him at his house. And because he sheltered us that day, because there was uncertainty about our house, fire was put out. It wasn't completely burned down, but they did torch it. Because he did give us shelter, next day he was beaten up in Sadar Bazaar, Jhansi, as to why he helped the Sikhs. The only other guy who visited our house was one Muslim guy, Yusuf Muhammad, who used to tutor my elder sister, in math. And every day he would come and bring groceries and ask, "Do you need milk? Do you need eggs? What else can I bring?" Some human elements to these. My grandfather owned, he was a contractor at some point for army, for clothing officers. Then he had his shop. My uncles had shops, 2 shops. They were looted and burned in Jhansi. Now, interesting thing which happened in Jhansi was, I'm saying Jhansi in a Punjabi accent now. We used to call him Jhansi back then in a Hindi accent. The DC of the city, Mr. Kaushik, he actually sent 2 cops to each Sikh house in Jhansi for 2 weeks. This is what assured that nobody was killed in Jhansi. If they were traveling outside of the Jhansi, they were killed. But nobody was killed in Jhansi because there were in administration, in our case, there was a man in administration who decided not under his watch. He actually sent 2 policemen to each Sikh house, and these cops basically stayed with us for about 2 weeks. And after that, we went to school and these cops left as well. Actually, these cops didn't even want to leave. They said, "You guys are feeding us better than we are fed. You're taking care of us more." A few things I want to share about that incident. What we discovered was that in our case, in Jhansi, our house was torched because it was sponsored by people who lived behind our house who were Jansangis. Jansangis are today's BJP. So this speaks to that. Was it only about Congress? No, it was about today's BJP as well. In our case, the Jansangis were the ones who sponsored the torching of our house. And an interesting thing which took place in our house, actually, meetings with Arya Samajis. The Arya Samaji leader came to our house, had a conversation with my grandfather, and I'm witnessing this, standing behind the curtain, listening to them. And the conversation is, we should take out a unity march in Jhansi, that Sikhs are in good terms. The agreement happens, but when the procession actually comes out in Sadarbara Jhansi, the chant, instead of saying Hindu Sikh Bhai Bhai, became Hindu Hindu Bhai Bhai. This speaks to the Arya Samajis and their way of operating in Jhansi, and Jansanghs and their people operating in Jhansi. Because there were no killings, people from other universities came to, there was a university in Jhansi called Bundelkhand University. The student population there were told to wear bangles because out-of-towners came and took out possession saying, how come they didn't kill any Sikhs? So this was the general sentiment in the city, who helped and who didn't, which administration person helped and who didn't, and what were the other political parties thinking other than the Congress and other religious elements and other individual elements. Now let me take this into some evidence now. All of you have seen some of these pictures, but maybe not the one on the right. One on the left is basically, the word genocide has been in the news a lot, whether this is a genocide or not. In November of 1984, the first one of the Indian magazines already called it a genocide. If you read the caption in the middle of the picture, where there's a Gurdwara burning in the background, it says the fires of genocides were still smoldering in all major cities. The term genocide was used in India by non-Sikh, by major Indian daily weekly magazine. On the right side, it talks about, there are four major culprits, as we know. There are several, but four major ones of November 84. And the one who shows up in news quite often these days still is Jagdish Tytler. He's seen in that picture. And I want you to look at what the caption says. It says, Jagdish Tytler, Congress MP from Sadar, never came anywhere near his constituency, which means he's not helping, he's an MP. His job is to help his constituency, but was seen demanding an armed posse of policemen for himself from the DG, which is the Director General of Police. Why is he demanding an armed posse? He's not being attacked. Is he already thinking that because he is organized and he's directing the crowds, he's paying them, he's supplying them with the voter registration list, the gasolines? My Fuffurji, which is my dad's sister's husband, was literally burned on the streets of Delhi. They stopped his motorcycle on a flyover at INA colony and took out the petrol from his motorcycle, used the same petrol and burned him. Anyway, was he afraid that because he's done all this, somebody's going to come after him? The other thing I want to mention is what's written at the bottom. And I know Amitabh Bachchan has been talked about quite a bit, and Mr. Randhawa has taken him to task to document it fully. I remember seeing him on Doordarshan as well. But this was nothing, this was a common knowledge back then. The slogans of Khoon ka badla khoon se lenge against the Sikhs were raised in the presence of the PM and actually telecast over the national TV network. Again, this is already documented in November 1984 in weekly magazines in India. The same culprit roams around free. He became a cabinet minister under Manmohan Singh's government. Eventually, because of the pressures, he was let go, but he was not really just removed from Delhi, made a chief of Congress in another state. He threatens people like Manmohan Singh on live TV. Fulka on live TV, Mr. Fulka, who is prosecuting 1984 November cases of Delhi. He still roams around free. Okay. Other magazines, the kind of verbiage they used when civilization broke down, this is what they are writing, not my verbiage. The reason I'm sharing things from November or from June of that year, already published in India, that these magazines disappeared. What happened to them? What happened to their editors? What happened to the ones who published these stories? How come they're never mentioned? How come these, look at the phrases. It's so clear as to what was going on. Genocide word is used, civilization broke down used, Jyotu Basu's verbiage is available, what an Indian TV, which is a government TV, is saying, what the government radio is saying. This is what we have heard. We have eyewitnesses who've been saying this, and now they are being documented from various things, including 1984 Living History Project. But this was already being done back then. But somehow these became not as available. I do want to share this one article from Pratipaksh, because this thing about that RSS and Mr. Advani, BJP actually were helping Sikhs. Yes, they did help. Ram Jethmalani is known to take Sikh cases. He still does some things. And yes, Mr. Advani did say, Vajpayee did say a couple of statements, but what do they really think in terms of the policies? Because it's always about the policies. And Nana Deshmukh, look at the date of this, in a Hindi weekly, he's RSS, which is a think tank of BJP. This is part of the Sangh Parivar, which includes Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. BJP is their political arm. VHP, SS is Shiv Sena, BD is Bajrang Dal, and HSS is Hindu Swayamsevak Sangh, which is very active in India, in US, because RSS is banned in US. Here are the major points from that article. This is November 1984, guys. Essentially, it said what happened in November 84 was a genuine feeling of anger of Hindus. Basically, now I'm not saying this. Sikhs have never said that Hindus are doing this. Sikhs have been saying Indian state is doing it, and Indian state has political parties, the administrations, intelligentsia, everyone was involved in this. He himself is saying Hindus did this. There was anger among Hindus. He's saying Sikhs invited attacks themselves. He glorifies Operation Blue Star. He says Sikhs are responsible for Punjab's violence. He says Sikhs shouldn't have been defending themselves. They should have shown patience and tolerance against the killers. He says Sikh intellectuals are the ones who turned Sikhs into militants because they cut them off of their Hindu roots, essentially saying, why are Sikh academics saying that Sikhs are a separate, independent, and sovereign religion? And he lauded Rajiv Gandhi's tree statement, and all of you know that, when he said, justifying the genocidal massacre, that when the big tree falls, the earth trembles. So this is in writing, an article, Inca RSS Gatjod. Inca is Indian National Congress, RSS Gatjod, how they're coming together. This is written by their ideologue. Okay. Coming back to weaving into what I had been noticing. So what did I do with all what I saw in 84, June, May, June, and October, November? Well, 2 weeks after November, I think sometime in December, my dad actually went to US Embassy in Delhi. And he basically said, it's time for me to leave this country. This is not my country anymore. This was the sentiment. I'm witnessing all this as a 12-year-old. We did not apply for political asylum. We applied to leave the country. And we left. I landed in America on July 4th, 1986. Call it coincidences, but I don't believe there are any coincidences. This is when I landed this is the land of the free on July 4th, on Independence Day. In another 2 years, I decided to give formal allegiance to the Guru. In Sikhi, that's called being Amritari. Amritaris who were mentioned in the Bachit. Amritaris who defended everything in South Asia, including against the ISIS in 16th and 18th centuries, including freeing India and Pakistan's. I started looking into it once I moved to this country because I had mostly heard the propaganda in India. I had witnessed few things, I had heard few things. As a high schooler in this country, now I'm beginning to read about it, find about it. What does it mean to be a Sikh? And it takes me only 2 years that I want to be part of this system, not the propaganda war by the state or anti-state people who seem to be actually fueled by state many a time, but this whole idea of Guru Granth Sahib, which is the wisdom, the infinite wisdom as I call it now, and the Panth, which is the collective Sikh psyche. Yep, I became an Amritari in 1988. To me, Amrit is a political ceremony. It is not a spiritual ceremony. It never really was. It has elements of that. Really what happens that day is you publicly declare, I belong to this group. I belong to this school of thought. This is becoming, like CPI, CPM have card-carrying members. This is sort of saying, I have become a kirpan-wearing member of the Khalsa Brotherhood, the Khalsa siblinghood. And essentially, after that, in the conspiracy of silence, I'm training my mind. What do I mean by training? I'm training to understand what is it that what has happened here? What did I see in this last 2 years? Once I landed, on July 4th, I landed in this country in America. And obviously, there's all sorts of anger, there are all sorts of feelings, but nobody talked about it. I remember we came to this country, we didn't talk about it. Not in the family, not in the larger family, not with my uncles and aunts, 7 siblings of my mom. We rarely had a conversation, maybe except on the gurdwaras at the anniversaries of Junes or some Shahadat days, you would have some conversation. Training for me was knowing what happened. I know what I saw, I know what I heard, but I also need to know much more. Who are these Sikhs? What is our heritage? What is in the Guru Granth Sahib? Why do people take Amrit? What was Amrit about? Why was there a battle of Amritsar? Why was this vengeance against the Sikhs? So I just went after reading. Read anything available, anything and everything. Learn to read Gurmukhi, learn Punjabi. Let's read the Punjabi literature and English literature. Let me go interview people who are involved. At some point, this angry young man returned to India in 1997. It took me 13 years. Maybe Tera is another thing to think about. Tera is 13, Tera is yours in Punjabi and Sikh traditions. And I was very, very angry for those years. I had to figure out how to channelize this anger. At some point, I think it was between 88 and 93, I started to speak about it in my local Gurdwara, in my university, started doing volunteer work. I remember taking everything with Jaswant Singh Khalra worked on, getting those faxes from India, where he was a chairman and Jaspal Singh Dhillon was the secretary, getting their reports. And they were part of Shomani Akali Dal Human Rights Wing, working with them, taking Ranjan Lakhanpal, the advocate from Chandigarh, to UN subcommittees in New York. This was about, we need to document, we need to tell our story. I need to understand Guru Granth Sahib, I need to understand Sikh history. After doing all that in 1997, for the first time I went back to Punjab, went back to India. And it was traumatic to land in the country where the airport is named Indira Gandhi International Airport in New Delhi. Because she invoked different images. But since then I've read her biographies. Since then I've read about what she herself had said about Sikhs in 1970s and her alliances with various people. But anyway, lots of readings. You at some point start to feel sorry for her, the kind of upbringing she had, what Mr. Nehru had written in Glimpses of Heritage, training her by citing Sanskrit sloks. This is the indoctrination she went through, even though she didn't like him, where he cites to her, writes a letter to her while she's attending Oxford, where he says, quoting a Sanskrit slok, saying, for the good of a family, a member may be sacrificed. For a good of a community, a family may be sacrificed. For the good of a nation, a community may be sacrificed. This is what she grew up with. Anyway, I also remember I had no reason to go back to Jhansi except to visit one man, and his name was Bhagwan Das, because this is the man, probably because of who I sit where I sit even today. It was interesting. I didn't even know how to thank him. And he didn't know what to say back. I didn't have reason to visit Jhansi other than that. Then I spent 5 years in Punjab. So you know what? I need to understand the pulse of where 80% of Sikh community lives, We call it Punjab, they call it Des, call it homeland, call it whatever. Puran Singh has written about what Punjab is about. I've never lived in Punjab. I used to just visit it as a tourist. Let me go meet the politicians, meet the scholars, live in the villages, set up the rehabilitation center for indirect victims of tortures, meet the militants whose state claims have been rehabilitated, and in some cases they still were in jails or came out, talk to them, learn Gurbani, learn the secondary tradition of the Sikhs, learn Guru Granth Sahib's languages. All that was happening for those 5 years. And essentially, for me, what happened was that anger had transferred into developing more awareness. Anger is destructive. Anger, in Guru Granth Sahib, it says, the thing which will kill you at the end of the day is anger. Krodh. Anger is not the Sikh way to do anything. I had to learn that the hard way. I had two options. If I was in Jhansi, who knows what I would have become? Who knows who I would have joined? Who knows, whether I've been fighting with AK-47 or not? Who knows whether I would end up in Punjab or in some other place? It is easy for us to say militants did this, what followed between 84 to 93 to 91 specifically. But if something you have seen, if something has happened in your families, if you have learned about it, if you have started studying what has happened since 1947 towards Sikhs in Punjab, it changes you. So you have two options. Your option is to remain angry and do possibly some very stupid things, and become even more aware and figure out how to work with anyone and everyone, people who write to people who pick up arms. And, after two career changes, now I'm back to being an activist. Awareness is not itself enough. I need to learn how to talk about these things and not just present the pain narrative, but also the counter narrative of those who have dealt with these things. And in that, developing those narratives, here is what I share with you. And I've been sharing this for a few years, but I've picked a few ideas to talk about today. We really do need to understand the Sikh psyche. In Sikh psyche, June 10th by itself, June month itself is huge. This is the same time in 18th century where Emperor Farooq Siyar has declared that they're going to behead every Sikh after they have killed Banda Singh Bahadur, the one who established the Sikh Raj. This is at the same time, about 30 years later, Diwan Lakhpat Rai from Lahore kills more than 10,000 Sikhs. 2/3 of the Sikh population he killed. That was called the Chota Kallugara, the smaller genocide, one of the three major genocides of the Sikhs so far. This is roughly the month. Look at the violence in all this. This is why we must understand what Sikh psyche, the Punjabi Sikh psyche grows up with, and listening to their Vara, they're being reminded of this. This is what they read, or they used to. Who knows what is happening now? Where Dhyan Singh Dogra, the traitor because of which the Punjab as a kingdom got annexed, how he crushed the skull of Chand Kaur, and what he does to Naunihal Singh, who was the heir apparent to Ranjit Singh's kingdom. How in 84 the Sikh regiments, yes, we hear about what happened with the militants who fought back, the defenders, the Khadkus, but there were so many more in regiments and in civilians who rebelled and fought and died, and some are still languishing in jails. And yes, there were others like Sukha Jinda, who assassinated General Vaidya, and others like Behan Singh and Satwan, who assassinated Mrs. Gandhi. That's the term state uses. Sikh use the word Sodhya. Sodha is to be corrected. And this whole complex, which is Harinder Sahib and Akal Takht Sahib complex, we need to understand. People have been defending this for ages. And I only give examples from 18th century here. But what Kapoor Singh has written is something which Sikh psyche needs to understand, because this is being challenged again today in 2016. that what Sikhs do in this complex is not a matter of concession by a political state, it is a right of the Sikhs. And this is why every state, whether it was the Mughals, whether it was the Indians, the British, whoever, they keep demolishing this complex, which is a reminder to Sikhs of that this is the Vatican-like place of the Sikhs. Not much changes, between 84 and 1764. They had banned access to Darbar Sahib in 1764. Same thing in 84. They cordoned it off. You were allowed to enter but not allowed to leave after June 1st, after May 31st. In 1764, they said no political rights. In 84, Sikhs are being treated as second-class citizens. There's a prices on heads in 1764. There are rewards. There are killers with impunity who are being rewarded literally in their pays and in their ranks for doing this. It's all documented. State hires its own chronicles to say what is happening with the Sikhs. Same thing in 84. State owns the media and the institutional version is the state's version. But all this is being challenged now. When the I.K. Gujral, Prime Minister's son, Rajiv Gujral, I'm forgetting his name, he in fact went on record last year to say, we need to have a full inquiry of June 84. We don't know what really happened there. There are too many stories floating. Even the story within the Indian Army has changed. It has changed several times. The story in the administration has changed so many times. Story about who was fighting and what they were fighting for and the reasons they were fighting for has changed so many times. Back then it was governed by Islamic laws. Now it was governed by Hindutva or pseudo-secular laws. Roughly we're fighting the same thing. So why do Sikhs exist? Because in Guru Granth Sahib it says, this is where Gurbani is so important to understand Sikh psyche. It says the graceful is the word used for divine in Gurbani. It says, if you are the agent of the divine, if you want to be the follower of the graceful, you need to make sure there is no harassment of anyone. And when there is no harassment of anyone, we need to establish that level of Raj. Raj is a system of governance at minimum, as well as the level of statehood or nation state. That's why Sikhs exist. They have been doing this. Guru Nanak did it himself, and Sikhs continue to do it, to establish a benevolent state. Bhindranwale, by the way, was known to say this, that I'm not asking for it. Khalistan, yes, why are we afraid to use this word? The word has been used so many times. We need to contextualize it, not appropriate it only with the Indian propaganda, the state propaganda. He used to say it, I'm fighting for Sikhs' rights. I'm not fighting for independent state. 84, it was so clear. The resilience of the Sikhs, this is Ratan Singh Pangu writing about it in Panth Prakash. The book is called Sri Guru Panth Prakash, History of the Sikh People. And I want you to read it says at any battlefield, do not back off for fear of death. At any adversity before Panth, they forsake their being for it. At any battlefield, they hold the nishan and lead from the front. Battle drum accompanies them as they engage in battlefield. This picture you are seeing is a very common picture. I am sharing it as well for two reasons. This picture actually had two army people in front of it. I just cropped that off because that's not what I want to talk about. This is the only picture available with the Nishan Sahib. After this, every picture, they realized Nishan Shah was still there. They removed it, and every other picture has been without the Nishan Sahib of the demolished Akal Takht Sahib. But this was written about 18th century Sikhs. This was what Pangu was saying, why Sikhs exist, when he's answering the question to Sir David Ochterlony in the Ludhiana mission under Captain Murray. But this is the story of the Sikhs. They do not back off. So in 84, that's what happened. Just like in 1764, Gurbaksh Singh fights the Battle of Amritsar in Darbar Sahib complex. Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale does it in June 84. And his statement was, "Aarn deo, let them come," just like what it was in 1764. So I'm not going to talk here about, I've done this before. If you guys are interested, you can look at how even the planner of June 84 Operation Blue Star, Lieutenant General S.K. Sinha, talks about why Bhindranwale had the right to defend That's something we should be looking at from the horse's mouth, and instead of talking about whether there should be arms here or not without understanding the Sikh tradition. If this is an independent space, nobody should be coming there to hijack it, to manipulate it. And even people like Patwant Singh have written, it took the blood and sweat of several generations to build it, to defend it, and to rebuild it. And those guys write about it. Those guys talk about it. These men did it. This is again the Sikh psyche. In several times before, Sukha Messing and Mehtab Singh story is well known on what they did to Masarangar. So Sikh idea is the idea of, this is the battle of ideas, by the way. Sikhs don't go after even the militant leaders who, Beyan Singh and Satwant Singh and Sukha and Jinda, they went after people who were well documented because state had failed. This is what happens in political games. No innocent people, not masses of people. They went after the state and its machinery, and they were done within 2 years. And that's the point I want to drive to the Sikhs. This whole narrative, we need insaf, we need justice hasn't been done. State never gives justice. The amount of people General Pinochet had killed, that amount of people were killed within a day in India when they killed that many Sikhs. And Pinochet's trial took place, he was found guilty. And nothing has been happening in India. Sikhs have been doing it their own way. People did. Sikhs did go after certain head of states and certain generals and some politicians. And by the time 86 came, it was all done. They were working on the next issues and the next steps. So this thing about, yes, we need truth reconciliation commissions, and there should be something, reparations done and redresses done. But that's the work of the state. People of the Punjab had already tried to do it. I remember going to People's Commission in Chandigarh when I lived there between 97 and 2002. 2 of their meetings. Thousands of people showed up. So it's not the documentation, it's not the proof, it's not the witnesses, it's state not allowing these things to come out in public. But it's a well-known lived life of Punjab and outside Punjab in India. It's also well-known facts in India. Let me come back to Puran Singh, who in another way describes all this. And I'm going to read this quote. He says, "What use will it be for slaves to be made free if they know not the rapture of their inner freedom? What is that academic, politically voting democracy that has no personality of man in it? Mere institutions and organizations are all so impersonal, are dead machines. They have no personal sweet sympathy of man. And how can such personal democracy of the Guru be established unless the individual has in his soul consciousness the spontaneous overflow of the soul, where the true man of the Guru actually grows to be multitudes? What will it avail him to be introduced to a thing of beauty if man is not yet cultivated enough for its pure joy? The fate of republics and the Soviets is of the old governments, still full of corruption, with altering the laws. Men have not outgrown their natures." This is the Sikh poet writing this in 1920s. This is the spirit of the Sikh. We fight the men who alter the laws to control other men. In the interest of time, I'm going to quickly go over 2-3 more slides. Divinity in Sikhi is that we, people who believe, Sikhs who believe that they're divine, they need to become the active agents of the divine. And divine is invoked to answer the call of the poor and unrepresented and to chastise the tyrants. Again, this is to show why an element, a vein of the Sikhs does these things. Now, what can you and I do to understand the idea of Gurbani? Well, there are 2 things in Gurbani which are very, very clear. House of light, what does that mean? That means light is about wisdom. It's about being enlightened human beings. And Guru Nanak Sahib in his very powerful word says, because he also showed up in the city of dead bodies, Maspuri. He uses that word, Maspuri. He says, let me tell you, I sing, I do the shabads, but I stick to this principle, including when I'm dead bodies around me, that I better speak the eternal words, which we now call the word truth. Make sure you speak it where it's needed. And that's what he does when he takes on Babur. And he also says, only the enlightened ones are worth living, rest are all dead. We are consciously dead is what he's saying. He says, if while living the honor is lost, all consumption is shameful. So this whole thing about honor, this whole thing about being enlightened, none of this is possible if you are not mindful. It is about becoming mindful. It is not about being angry or full of vengeance, but being mindful and knowing principally what is it that you're supposed to do. He documented things. He took on the unjust state. You know, today the world is celebrating Muhammad Ali, but they have forgotten the radical Muhammad Alis of 1960s, when he spoke against racism when he was not allowed to speak, when he spoke against Vietnam War, and he was labeled everything for it, but that's the man. Now here is a prophet, here is a guru who does it and he speaks to the emperor and he documents it and he says, this is why we need to create enlightened human beings. This became their work. And it is so clear that the work does not stop when you become enlightened. Then you need to learn how to operate in love. And operating in love is that, and this is a shabad by Baba Farid ji. He says, Dilo Muhabbat Jin se hi sachya. Let's look at it in this context. He says, those who love from the heart are genuine. Those who are speaking something else and thinking something else, they are underdeveloped. They cannot be drenched in divine love. You have to be drenched in divine love to see the hues of love. Variety is the colors of love. If you forget to identify with the divine, you become just a load on this earth. You weight on this earth. What is being said here is those who are drenched in love, they see the divine, and divine then comes within you. And when you are enlightened and drenched, that's when you know how to operate and to talk about even gory and bloody things like those of 1984. Now, a lot's been going on this week. You know what the current administration is up to. You know about the defiances of individuals within last year, not giving Siropas, to showing up at Sarbat Khalsas to 500,000 to 600,000 men, women, and children, to Bedbis of Guru Granth Sahib, to the failures of leadership. But I don't know how many of you really know that how the whole narrative of Sikhi is being changed legally again. The kind of bills which are being passed. How 1984 today, even today, the coverage is banned for June 6th. This is where I want to invoke Iqbal, where he says, Vatan ki fikr kar nadan, musibat aane wali hai, teri barbadiyon ke mashware hain asmanon mein. Think of the homeland, Desh, O ignorant one, hard times are coming. Conspiracies for your destruction are afoot in the skies. This is from Bangedara, his book. He has a poem called Portrait of Anguish. This is the warning I use in Iqbal's words for all of us. 30 million of us. And yes, we have had successes, and yes, 84 changed us. I am sitting here, changed because of 84. So many people became. We talk about those who left. What about those who entered? Those who wrote, those who drew, those who composed, those who filmed, those who did PhDs, those who are doing all sorts of things. Yes. But even given then, how many of them, the need is, how many of them understand that how legally things are being manipulated at Akal Takht Sahib, how the documentation of Sikh doctrine is being completely changed, how there are no agents of the Guru left who are working primarily for the Guru, the ones who need to be drenched in love and the ones who need to be operating in that light of Gurbani. I end with this slide. Statistics do tell the stories of the Sikhs who confronted unjust state, but if you really want to understand, statistics cannot tell. They'll tell you 80% Sikhs did this in 40s, and they'll tell you this many Sikhs died in 84, or this many defended Darbar Sahib. But if you really want to understand why, Sikhs confront unjust state, you will need to delve into Guru Granth Sahib. This is where Gurbani matters. Because Shabad worked on them. Shabad worked on them. And Sikh lovers have been embracing martyrdom for 5 centuries plus. And I can tell you, there's nothing state or psychiatrists can do anything about it. That should say state or psychiatrists. Psychiatrists can't explain this phenomena. They've tried. State cannot explain it. And Sikhs will continue to do it. Sometimes there will be loners like Shyam Singh Atariwala when the kingdom of Punjab was annexed. Sometimes there will be individuals too. Sometimes it's groups of 5s. Sometimes it's en masse, like when they regrouped in 1920s to win back Gurdwaras from state and the corrupt Mahants. And the Sikh theopolitical hub from where life insights are to be imparted. The highest level of that is Akal Takht Sahib. The smallest level of that is your local Gurdwara. They are being manipulated and hijacked. This is why we need to free them. We need to free our local place of insight, which is a Gurdwara, all the way to our complex, which we call Harinder Sahib and Akal Takht Sahib, because they're completely manipulated and hijacked for personal reasons or state reasons. They're not talking about Sikhi and the Sikh story. And that is your and my work. Write about it, sing about it, do whatever you need to do about it. Some people need to organize also. We need community organizers in these things. We also need people who are going to talk about how to get this done in today's age, where legal manipulation be countered with people's voices and legal voices as well. I know I've taken a long time, but I'm going to stop here and take your questions now.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Veer Ji, I think the Sangat is still absorbing the profoundness of the presentation. We don't have questions at this time, but if somebody does have questions, this is a time to speak up. If you'd like to ask the question over a mic or your microphone on your computer, then let me know and I can unmute you. I think the effect of asking the question personally is much better than writing it out. So wait for a couple of minutes here, Vijay. Otherwise, we'll go to the closing statements here. One question from. So I think I'll take these two questions and try to bring them together because they're actually asking the same thing. People are asking what age-old question: what is their next step to get organized? What is the next step to get organized? As well as how can a normal person, regular person here in the diaspora, what can they do to help out?
Well, the answer is very simple, guys. It depends on your capacity and your skill set and what risks you want to take. What are you trained for? You can be Malala-like. I'm going to use examples from other parts of the world and take on the whole Taliban in your own way. And you can be, so it just depends on your own capacities. Just go change the reality wherever you live. But I say more trainings are needed. I've identified that from your local Gurdwara to all the way, Akal Takht Sahib needs to be freed. On 84, unapologetically talk about it. Unapologetically. There are so much documentations available. It's so clear as to what was going on there. there had to be a manufacturing of the propaganda, which state did, and I've talked about those in other places. Essentially, all I'm saying is, don't say that nobody did anything. People documented, people fought, people even delivered justice in certain Sikh sense, we need to be prepared today where they're legally not manipulating things. So learn about it, get training. Don't just be angry about it. Don't give irresponsible statements in your internet warrior business. Take on whatever you can take on. Don't sit quietly. There's a lot of work. Our work is, in today's environment of India, there is so much to be done. There are natural alliances being built now. And finally, the left and the center is beginning to see that what is seen as Sikh leadership today is not really Sikh leadership. They're actually partners of the Hindutva leadership. And that's why Sikhs really need to create multiple voices to talk about what exactly are the Sikh ideals and who really should be building alliances with.
Thank you, Vijay. One question. People are asking, is there a place where they can actually get a hold of this documentation? That, for example, the state never released it, but we do have copies of it. Like, for example, some of them you showed also.
Currently, I just used them for the first time, and at some point I'll figure out a way to put them on some website. But a copy of this video the webinar will be available, as you had mentioned, in a couple of days. Once I know that I'm able to put some complete documentation on some website, then you can follow me on Twitter. I'll announce it there at OneForce.
Okay. You may have answered this question in some way, but Rupinder Kaur is asking, how can I free my local Gurdwara? And so obviously starting small and looking at the local community, how can we make a difference in how the Gurdwara operates in day-to-day today?
There are multiple ways to do it. There are two schools of thought. One says you can actually become clear about what you want to accomplish in a Gurdwara. You have to work several years there to change the realities. The other says work outside the Gurdwaras, create a parallel system where you actually do provide insights on life. And at some point, that very Gurdwara will invite you to take over, or you can physically go take over. Both systems are available in Sikh traditions. It is very clear within the Guru period and in last 100 years that the change within the Gurdwaras didn't happen from within. It always came from outside. For example, in Guru Tegh Bahadur Sahib period, he had to set up training centers at Anandpur Sahib when Amritsar would not allow them to do it. And same thing, 1920s when the Gurdwara Sudhar movement essentially was a Singh Sabha movement outside Gurdwaras, and eventually Gurdwaras commemorated them. So I essentially would say your number one work is to become clear about Sikh ideology, train your own mind, find some like-minded individuals. Then with those 2-3 people, sit down and decide what you want to take on. But you got to be clear. It's usually these things take a long time. So pick your battle, keep pushing the agenda, and be drenched in light and love. That's the Sikh way to do it.
Thank you, Vijay. In your knowledge, and you may know about it or you're part of it, is there a sort of like a group of Sikh intellectuals, maybe here in the US and India and across the world, that talk amongst themselves and discuss these things? Is there something like that, a society, a group, or something that you are aware of or are a part of? People are asking.
This is something I didn't mention, but I'll mention it now. This for some other time, there needs to be a really analysis of a discussion of how in 1984, 85, or pre-80s, the Sikh intelligentsia, the Sikh academia actually delivered. But for the last several years, maybe I'm using some very harsh term, but they have really had zero deliveries. Zero to little, I should say. So basically, regurgitating old things, not presenting solutions to either leadership, whether it's religious or political or local, not coming up with, you know, white papers of their own, best practices guides of their own. There has been, including of diaspora, to be very honest here. Diaspora is doing some amazing things, but when it comes to where four-fifths of the Sikh population lives, they actually are very fearful. I've noticed even the diaspora Sikh organizations generally not talk about those things which the Indian organizations have started to talk about. If I were to put up on screen right now what the Lok Raj Sanghathan wrote about the 1984 rally this week, and I didn't show you their name, you will say this is some Sikh militant organization doing it. They have been doing it for 30 years. Non-Sikhs in Delhi. And Sikhs in their carefully crafted verbiage, I still haven't figured out how to talk about things which we really need to be talking about. So we have our work cut out.
Okay. Thank you, BT. We're getting close to another couple of minutes, and we'll wrap it up. Are there other further recommended readings that people are asking? Videos, speeches, readings, etc., that they can be, privy to get more motivation, inspiration here.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's a variety of stuff on the web now. There are varieties of organizations who are working on various elements of 84. So unless there's a specific recommendation, I can't answer this because 10 years ago, this used to be a tough question to answer. We will say, okay, read these 5 books or watch these 3 movies or watch these 2 documentaries. Now we have hundreds of these, and you can Google it and try to figure it out. And those of you who are more interested in first-hand sources or more critical sources, then you have to start reading the reports which were published between June 84 and let's say within a couple of years of 84 about the Punjab. For example, Seminar magazine did a whole issue on Punjab issues. This is a monthly magazine from India. Indian Defense Review has written about what has happened there. All India Sikh Student Federation did a first press release in underground in I think within 2 weeks of June 84. So, those documents are very, very important. The speeches of MPs, everyone quotes Kapoor Singh, which is great. I love that betrayal of the Sikhs one. But the other ones between 87 and 88, which came in Indian Parliament, Indian Defense Minister George Fernandez previously said that 16 Shaktiman truck full of material was looted. Current Defense Minister says, if that's what happened, we will locate them and give it back. So this kind of nonsense games are going on because in public memory, public memory is weak everywhere. We are going through election period in America, and look what we are facing. And there are similarities between who might become president here and who already is a PM in India. But even with all that nonsense going on, you gotta go after primary and secondary sources. And so I recommend reading those if you want to look into the realities as captured, what we call contemporary and near contemporary sources. If you want to understand the phenomena, then PhDs and studies which are coming out in the last 5 years become very important because they are now looking at it a little bit removed and a little bit dispassionately, who are able to see and construct what happened for Sikh generations as well as for Indians who are willing to listen and understand what really is happening in India and how what has happened since 84 is a precursor to what is currently happening in India.
Okay, thank you, Virji. I think we're right on time here. I'd like to take a comment, not a question, a comment from Kanwarbir Singh. Says he personally wants to thank Harinder Singh and the team for narrating his personal story. I was there in 1984 too in Chandigarh. It is great to hear from a learned person in the light of Gurbani. We need to stay in touch with our history. He's not an activist yet, but he hopes to become one, especially in a Sanghat like yours. and he thanks you. And with that, I'd like to thank you, thank everybody here for all their questions. And I know there's many questions right now that are unanswered or we've had the time to do so. But you're more than welcome to ask those questions on Twitter to Harinder Virji. His Twitter handle is @oneforce. That one is number one with the word force. Um, Please be reminded that these webinars are provided for free, but there is a cost associated with technology and administration. If you feel you've benefited from this particular webinar or others in the past, please consider making a donation to SikhRI or becoming a webinar sponsor. More details can be obtained in a follow-up email you will receive or by emailing info@sikhri.org. This is a reminder that to wait a few seconds for a follow-up survey. Your feedback is extremely important to us, and I appreciate your time. Harinder Virji, do you have any closing comments at this time?
No, I'm good. All I want to mention is that keep talking about 84 in any capacity you can in your circle of influence, and do delve into Gurmani to understand why this idea of light and love is so important. Being drenched in love and being enlightened mind will help us develop the Sikh way to operate for today's scenarios we face in our localities as well as in India. Thank you.
Thank you, Virji. With this, the webinar is a wrap. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.